Hello everyone. I hope you're doing all right. Hope you had a nice weekend. Um, I wanted to do this video today. I got a new book, um, OSR game. It's a Greek game. It's called Kryptes Katharmata. It means crypts and creeps, or crypts and bastards, or crypts and something or other. Crypts and lowlifes, maybe something like that. And I thought, since it's in Greek and most people probably won't be able to read it, if you're not Greek, I mean, I thought I'd do a little flip through or review to give you an idea what it's about and um, to make a comparison with other OSR games. Um, so yeah, let's get into it. Hope you like it. So first off, there's a free PDF available of the first part of the book, of the first, let's say, 54 pages. So we're going to use that since I haven't been provided with a PDF with my purchase because I bought it with a retailer. So this is the PDF. As it says here, is the player's handbook, let's say, but it's technically it's the same. It's just part of the complete book. So it's just the first, let's say, um, it goes all the way until magic and witchery. So it's about 54 pages. It's the first four chapters. It doesn't even include the combat rules or anything else. But I think that will be enough to at least give you an idea. And after we're through that we can take a look at some of the actual book as well. Let's see. There's just a description of what this is for. This is just for the players, but basically, it's the same book. It's the same. So the chapters up to chapter 4 are exactly the same in the complete book. And the complete contents are shown here as well, all the way to the index, which I think is kind of weird. They didn't make a separate table of contents for this version, but okay, it's not a big deal. So obviously it starts out with an introduction about what RPGs are, what the OSR is. So the OSR is mentioned by name, so that you can, I mean, this book is definitely marketed as an OSR product for your information. So I'm not just saying it because it's old school or old-fashioned, let's say. And it goes through the usual fare of what distinguishes the OSR from other games and what distinguishes this game from other games. And obviously the emphasis is on rulings over rules, exploration over storytelling. The story emerges from the game and is not the, let's say, it's not the jump-off point, but more the result of the game. There is a section about the central mechanism of the game, and it explains that there is no central mechanism in this particular game. I'm not sure if I completely agree, but I get where they're coming from, because it doesn't even use the D20 roll the way other games do. It doesn't use polyhedral dice. It only uses 6-sided dice, and we'll get to the rules later on in a little bit. So yeah. Let's see. It also explains the scenery or the setting, right, of the adventure, that the game doesn't have its a set setting, but rather provides a set of tables which you can use to generate settings on the fly. We'll get into that as well, because the game actually provides a lot, heaps of information, heaps of random tables to generate just about anything you could require to run your game. There are, though, and this is interesting, some presuppositions about what the game is about. So there is a tone and a theme, let's say, to the game. So the first one is the world is unexplored. So there are a lot of unknown and dangerous places. He compares it to how the ancient Greeks would have viewed Central Asia or Asia in general. So there's a lot of myths and rumors and things about these unexplored regions, and the dangers they pose to the known world, let's say. So that leads us to point 2. The world is strange and full of secrets. The world is full of hidden treasures. The world is deadly, and and survival is key, obviously. It does mention it makes an initial mention, let's say, about the influences of the game, the tone and the influences. So it does mention pulp, literature, Howard, C.A. Smith, Vance, Leiber, Lovecraft, and the like. But also things like Herodotus, histories, and the books about demons by Mikhail Psellos. Mikhail Psellos was a Byzantine philosopher and alchemist, among other things, and astrologer, if I remember correctly. But anyway, he was a Byzantine philosopher at any rate. As well as another Greek writer, Fotis Iliopoulos, who wrote about other strange things. He was fascinated by the East and Eastern mysteries and the like. So all these things kind of inspired this project. Next we have a note about the dice. So as you can tell, everything is a variation of the d6. You can have 1d6 or d6. You can have 2d6, 3d6 plus 1, 1d2, 1d3, and then we have this d66, and even in some instances d666, which is basically you roll 2d6, and instead of adding them to each other, you read them like you would a D100. So one is decimal and one is numeral. So you get up to 66 basically. You go from the lowest would be 11 and the highest would be 66. There are some gaps in there, but he uses this system for his random tables. So at later chapters we'll encounter this a lot more, but probably not in this PDF, because that's all included in the GM chapters. So anyway, some explanations about dice, how the dice work. I don't think that's all that difficult, so I don't think I need to go through that, because once I explain how the game works, I think that should be clear. So then we get into the characters, the roles and the characters. So this game obviously starts with the usual fare. It uses the same 6 stats as Dungeons and Dragons, but translated in Greek. And obviously it has the same philosophy, so it's 3d6 down the line. All stats go from 3 to 18. Once you've done that, you can select your role. We'll get to those in a little bit. Then you can select your background. We'll get to those later on as well. Then you determine your starting wealth and your starting equipment, and you determine your character's name. There are tables for the names. You can roll for them as well. We'll get into those in a little bit as well. So we begin with the abilities. So I did want to turn your attention to this because one of the things that characterizes this book and this game is the use of Greek language. So what we generally tend to see here in Greece in modern culture, pop culture, entertainment, and all that stuff is that the Greek language is kind of being neglected, let's say. So this game kind of tries to, well, not tries. I mean, this game kind of turns that around and basically puts all the emphasis on Greek. I mean, there are a few loan words here and there. For example, the game does say it is too metal to care about strict rules or whatever, strict, stuff like that. So it does use the word metal and black metal and stuff on occasion, and I think that's more done in jest. But it actually has a very pristine sense of language, a linguistic identity, let's say. And I like how they translated the 6 abilities. That's like at the core of the game of any D&D clone or of any similar game. So what we have here is Romi, which basically means strength becomes Romi, and Romi literally in Greek comes from Rome, right? So and Greeks in Byzantine times referred to themselves as Romii, Romios. Romios is a Roman. So it became synonymous both with Greek, but also with virtue and valor and strength and all that stuff. So Romi in this case means vigor and strength. Krasi is a generally accepted term for constitution, stamina. I'm not exactly sure what the etymology is of the words, but I think it's just onomatopoeia. So you basically, it has that. The krasi, when you hear that word, you think about crashing into things and coming out alive, let's say. So that's kind of what I imagine about it. But it stands for health, physical constitution, and stamina. Dexiosini is dexterity, and it literally means the same thing. So dexterous, comes from dexter in Latin, which means right hand. And dexiosini in Greek means the same thing. So that stands for precision, quickness or speed, coordination, and balance. Balance. Noisy comes from nous, so that means intelligence. Stands for memory, perception, logic, and insightfulness, let's say. Sharpness, things like that. Pneuma, so pneuma is interesting because pneuma means spirit, but it stands for wisdom, obviously. Stands for the STC. The STC is also perception, or the STC is insight. Let me see, how do I translate that? Intuition. Oh yeah, I forgot about that. Intuition. The STC is intuition. Krisi is critical thinking, let's say. Pneumaticki συγκρότηση is it's kind of a weird terminology here, but that's basically spiritual constitution, or like mental constitution, I should say. So basically willpower. And then lastly we have parousia, and parousia means presence. So parousia stands for sociability, personality, appearance, and attractiveness. these are the, and the explanation it gives for these abilities. Obviously, they're not so hardcore like Edward Reggie in Lamentations, where he says that charisma has nothing to do with your appearance and stuff. Here he actually does imply that it has to do with your appearance, but it's just part of it, obviously. And obviously, those are just meant to give an idea about your characters. We will soon see that the actual stats of the abilities are almost meaningless. I mean, they're not so because there are modifiers, but those are very limited. So it's basically and I mean I'll get to that right away anyway. So basically, if you have an ability of 15 or higher, you get a +1, and if it's 6 or lower, you get a -1. That's it. There's no modifiers other than that. And even then, even so, using the modifiers on things like hit points and extra damage and everything is an optional rule in this game. So this game is very hardcore in that sense, that it basically gives you the stats only almost exclusively just to give you an idea about who your character is. What the stats do influence, though, and this is very important, this game puts a very strong emphasis on the prime requisites. So that means that each class, so we'll get into those right away. We have 3 classes. We have the strong one, the wise one, and the crafty one, let's say. All right, so the strong one is the fighter, your archetypal fighter. The wise one is your archetypal magic user or priest or cleric. And the crafty one is the thief. So each of these classes has a base fame requirement, or the base fame. So this game, instead of experience points, counts fame. It's the same thing. You gather treasure, you spend that treasure, and from spending the treasure you get fame. This is one other detail from this game. It's not just gaining the treasure; it's actually spending it. Not just spending it on equipment, because that doesn't count. You have to spend it on festivities, on orgies, on food, on drinks, on women, on all that stuff. And the more money you spend, the more fame you get. So basically you buy rounds and stuff. So that becomes like an RP thing on its own in this game. I like that idea a lot. But what I was getting at is each class has their base fame and their prime requisite and secondary requisite. What this means is the prime requisite doesn't give you a bonus on your fame that you gain from killing targets or enemies and gathering treasure, but instead it gives you a discount on your fame requirement. So if you have and you'll see that here, right? So the fighter, the strong guy, has 2,000 fame, base fame. The wise one has 2,500, and the crafty one has 1,500. So that's about the same as you'd expect from basic expert D&D or something. Now, what happens is that if you have, let's say, if you have a, I don't remember the here you go. So if you have on your base on your prime requisite, right? If you have a 13 or 14. You get a -5% discount on your base fame, right? So that means that you get -5% is from let's say as the crafty one, from 1,500 you go to 1,425. As a fighter, from 2,000 you go to 1,900, and from you get the idea, right? So you get that discount, so you get to level up earlier. That's basically what happens. In addition, the XP requirement each level just doubles. So from, let's say you start out with 1,500, once you level up it becomes 3,000. Once you level up again it becomes 6,000, and so on. Very simple, very clear. But then if you have a requirement, you get let's say, if you have the requisite, I mean, you go from 1425 to, now I need a calculator to make sure I don't mess that up. So 1425 times 2 is 2850, times 2 is 5700, and so on. So very simple. This remains basically remains consistent. But then there is one more thing, one more detail that is very interesting, because what happens, there is also a secondary requisite, which is your class's secondary ability, right? And we'll get into those in a minute, but basically each class has a prime and a secondary. And instead of actually directly influencing your XP requirements, it actually influences your prime requisite. So, which means that if you have, let's say you have a fighter, right, but you only have 12 strength, but you do happen to have a constitution of like 15, right? That means that from 12, your strength goes up to 15. It counts as if your prime requisite basically counts as if it were 15 plus. So that means you get the full bonus on your XP requirement, which means that rather than having to choose a different class because you don't have the stats you needed for your class, you can actually fudge your requisites in this way and still be motivated to play the class you wanted. I think this is a very interesting mechanic, a very simple small detail that actually offers a lot of flavor to the game, and a lot of it's actually, because in the end your stats don't really matter, but at the same time they do, and at the same time they give you a lot of leeway. So I think that's really cool. Okay, so we understand the stats and the XP requirements. There's also a couple of other details. So obviously intelligence plays a role in the number of languages you speak, as it does in D&D. Presence plays a role in morale for your companions and in reactions for NPCs. So that's the same as you'd expect. And then there is optional rules for using modifiers for other classes. And again, as I said, exceptional stats from 15 and higher get a +1, and defective stats of 6 or lower get a -1. That's it. That's all the modifiers you get. Strength modifies your damage. Constitution modifies your HP. Dexterity modifies your attacks with ranged weapons. That's it. It doesn't modify your armor. And wisdom modifies your saving throws against mind attacks. That's all. Okay. So that's all, and those are optional rules. I would suggest using them. If I were to play this game, I would use them, and I'm definitely planning on running the game at some point. Although I will probably add a bunch of stuff into this as well. Anyway, so let's get into the classes. As I said, we have 3 archetypes. We have the it's kind of like in D20 Modern, funny enough. We got the strong hero, the wise hero, and the crafty hero. That's basically what it is. I mean, they're not. The thing is though that the game doesn't, you don't start out as a hero. So it's the strong one, the wise one, and the crafty one. That's how I call them now. I don't know if I can think of a better term. I'm not sure. But anyway, the strong one is the fighter, obviously. His prime requisite is strength, Romy, and his secondary requisite is either constitution or dexterity, Krasi or Dexterity. He can use all weapons and armor, magical or no. He has the highest number of HP. So HP in this game is called resistance or adochi. As well as the best attack dice, and we'll get into attack dice in a minute as well. He can do multiple attacks against weaker opponents, and he has the best saving throws against poison, paralysis, or fear. I think he has to choose, but I'm not sure. I think he has to choose one or the other. They're usually mercenaries, soldiers, raiders, and bandits. All right. Multiple attacks. It explains multiple attacks a little bit further. I'm not going to get into it too much. The wise one, obviously, is the magic user or the cleric. But he tends more towards the magic user. His prime requisite is intelligence. His secondary requisite is spirit or wisdom. He can cast spells, obviously. And it works the same way as in D&D. There are spells per day. He has a caster level. He has to prepare spells each day in order to cast them. He's your standard fare magic user. He's weakest in battle. He has the worst hit dice. And the worst combat dice. Again, we'll get into those in a minute, don't worry. He can't use shields, but he can use light armor. And he can't use heavy weapons. He can use weapons though, so but the only magic weapons he can use are staves and short swords, and slings. All right. He can also use scrolls and wands, obviously. And his saving throw is he gets a bonus in his saving throw against spells, all kinds of spells, or against mind control, let's say. Okay. They're usually healers, intellectuals, shamans, priests, or exorcists. Okay. And then we have the crafty one. The crafty one is the thief. His prime requisite is dexterity, and his secondary requisite is intelligence, interestingly enough. Which makes a lot of sense, honestly, but you don't usually see that covered in old school D&D in one way or another. So the crafty one now has, first off, has what they call technasma. Technasma means like a trick up his sleeve. Let me see if I can translate that. A trick, yeah, a trick or contrivance, something like that. So those are basically the thief skills, right? Technasmata. They require shrewdness and dexterity. All right. They can backstab for critical hits. They can use all kinds of weapons, but only light armor and bucklers. No heavier shields than bucklers. And their saves are best against traps and poisons. And they actually get 2. The other 2, I think, need to choose between poison, paralysis, or fear in the case of the fighter, and spells or mind attacks, whatever, mind control. So anyway, there are some rules about he has the most explanations of all his skills. But anyway, so he has the backstabbing, and his thief skills, let's say, his tricks, are basically the same as thief skills. So it's move silently, climb, listening for sounds, searching and disabling traps or mechanisms in general, hiding in shadows, sleight of hand, and using magic items. So using magic items here is a separate skill as well. There's an explanation about all these things. I won't get into detail because most people watching this probably already know how that works, more or less. There's a side note about mercenary companies for some reason. I mean I don't think it's out of place here. It's just kind of out of the blue, but it's basically how, the idea is how, aside from having the characters have their own identity and stuff, you could also think about giving your party a name and a symbol, and basically you might also run across other parties, right? You see that in other OSR games as well, in Old School Essentials, for example, in the random tables for encounters. You might run into another party, stuff like that, or you might run into a decimated party and might be able to recruit someone, things like that. So that is mentioned here, and then we get into the tables and the stats for each class. So these are interesting to look into, because basically what this game does is it replaces all die rolls that you normally get in D&D with D6s, and it has a different method of regulating combat, basically. So instead of having an attack bonus or a to-hit armor class or whatever, this is kind of a combination of the two, or kind of a middle ground, using a D6. So basically each class has an attack roll, or a combat die, actually, right? So, and it starts with 6+. What that means is that you have to roll a 6+ on 2d6. That's your base attack. So that's the 2-hit armor class whatever. That's the 2-hit armor class 0, actually, literally, right? Because what happens is that if your opponent wears armor or has a natural armor class, which I suppose they might, it gets added to your attack die, so to your combat die. So if you have a 6+ and your opponent has 3 armor, let's say, you have to roll higher than 6 + 3. So that means you have to roll a 9 or higher on 2d6 in order to hit. This kind of reminds me of how BattleTech does combat, basically. And obviously, as you level up, it goes down. It gets lower, and obviously the fighter, the strong one, has the fastest progression. Wait, who is this? Paul? Oh, wait. Now I'm getting confused. Yeah. Polymechanos. Polymechanos is the crafty one. Oh god. Okay, this is a bit confusing because I'm not used to these terms. And the wise one obviously has the slowest. Next we have the saves, right? They call them Zaria Apophygis, so that means avoidance. Apophygy is to avoid or to dodge. Each class has but one save. There are no saves versus separate things like in Basic Expert or in AD&D. Instead, you have one save like in Swords and Wizardry, but depending on the situation, it might be a different save, right? So if you're rolling the save against poison, for example, as a thief, you'll get the +1 on your roll. On your roll, not on the not on the save itself, right? So again, as with the attacks, you have to roll 9 or higher on 2d6, right? And if you have a bonus as a thief, for example, or a bonus for your class against a certain type of save that you need to do at any given moment, you add a +1 to your die check. Then lastly, we have the skills, and the thief skills are done on the d6 as you would in Lamentations. So they start at 1 or 2, to 1 to 3, 1 to 4, 1 to 5, to finally 1 to 6. And that's only on the 12th level, so we assume that the level cap is technically at level 12. And I think that's mostly just because at some point, the XP just keeps doubling, right? So at some point, there's really not much more to. It's almost impossible to gain the necessary XP, I think. So there's kind of a natural cap to the game, but you could probably go further than that as well. So next we have the hit dice. As you can see here, they're also managed a bit differently than you'd expect. Because basically the fighter, he has the advantage. So all the hit dice are all d6s. They all start with 1d6, except for the fighter, who gets a +1 to that as well. And obviously you can add your constitution modifier as well, in either case. And then the fighter goes to 2 + 1, 2 hit dice +1. Well, the crafty one goes to 2, and the wise one goes to 1 + 1. Right, so he has 1 die plus a 1. So what happens now? Each time you level up, you roll the entirety of the hit dice that you have gotten. Right, so say you level up to level 3. You had 2 + 1 hit dice. You go level 3, so you roll 3d6. If your total value now is higher than your previous one, you keep the new value. If it's lower, you keep the old value. That's what happens when you level up in this game. I mean, that's the base rule. Obviously, the DM can house rule anything. But I like the suggestion. It's an interesting one because each time you level, it could be, it could make a big difference, or it could make no difference at all. So it's a cool idea. And then obviously we get the spell progression for the magic user, for the wise one. So that's all cool. We have the bonuses here summarized for the saves. It actually doesn't seem to suggest that you have to choose after all. So the strong one has a bonus on poison, paralysis, and fear after all. Okay, well, whatever. I don't think it. No, I'd have to look into it, but I think, yeah. No, I think it's not either or. I think it's all. All right. There's also a table for what equipment they can use and and their titles per level. So these are pretty interesting too. Very flavorful. I could go through them if you'd like. So level 1. That's funny. Level 1. Let me just make sure. I get it right. So Skutatos. Skutatos. I think Skutati is Skutari. Skutatos is a man-at-arms. I think that's what I gather from this. All right. Anyway, so level 1 man-at-arms. Level 2 is a vanguard, and so on. I mean, Skutatos, Πρόμαχος, Βουκελάριος, Ανδριωμένος, Πρωτοσπαθάριος, Μυρμιδόνας, Myrmidon, Εξολοθρευτής, Πολέμαρχος, Άρχοντας. Okay, those are pretty. So that's a warlord and a actual lord. Efchitis, Maganeftis, Giteftis, Magos, and so they're basically just flavor text. Obviously, it doesn't make a difference for your character, but they're very nice, very nice to have. These are all very exotic words. Most of them I wasn't aware of. But anyway, all right. There's some explanation about all these terms, which we've all gone through. I mean, I don't think they're too hard. Okay, and next we get to backgrounds. Backgrounds are pretty interesting because they basically give an idea about who your character is. There's a couple. There's some overlap between characters as well. So you can have. So for example, you have Evgenis here. Evgenis means noble or aristocrat. That's fun fact. That's where eugenics come from, because that's about, Evgenis means noble birth basically. So eugenics is about a healthy DNA and everything. Logios means intellectual. Proniarios, I'm not sure what that means. I think that's... I don't know. But anyway, Pronia is... how do you say? Providence. So Proniarios is a... that's a weird word. Pronator. What's a pronator? What the hell is it? Pronator. A muscle whose contraction produces or assists a person who pronates when walking or running. No, I don't think that's what I don't think that's what it means. Proniarios. I don't know what that means. So basically someone who lives on Providence? I don't know. Very strange. But anyway, you have all these backgrounds. They just give you an idea about who your character is. It's kind of like the secondary skills in Old School Essentials. You could use them to, to fudge or to roleplay some extra skills that you might have, some minor skills, non-combat skills, stuff like that. What we do see here, though, is in order, you roll for them based on the D66. So basically, you roll them as a D100, basically. So let's see. I rolled a 66 actually. So let's say I was a fighter. I'm a Chironactas. So that's a handyman, a handy worker. Let's say. Or if I were a thief, crafty guy, I would be a tomb raider. Stuff like that. These aren't all that important, but there's even more detail about those. So you can, for example, if you get a barbarian, for example, for your strong guy, you can select your barbarian tribe or roll for it. So you have the Hyperboreans, you have the Varangians, you have the Goths, you have the Cimmerians, you have the Alans, or the Xiongnu. Stuff like that. I personally, I just love that because it has absolutely no function in the game, but the book spends so much space just elaborating on this. Or if you're a nomad, you can be a Scythian, a Sauramate, I don't know what that is, a Messagete, a Petseneg. I think that's a tribe of a Turkic tribe or something, a Petseneg. A Sarmate or a Semetsk. I don't know what these terms are. I think some of these races are imaginary as well, but I know the Scythians exist, and I think the Petchenegs exist as well. So I think the rest of them exist as well. You can be a slave, obviously. Stuff like that. You can be a soldier. All right, all that stuff. Okay. Or a technician. If you're a technician, you have a lot of options here. an innkeeper, what you call a cobbler, right? I was going to say a sewer, but that's not the word. A painter, a calligrapher, all that stuff. Or I mean, so technician is not even the right word. I should say craftsman or something, right? So you have all these options here. A baker, right? And so on. Anyway, you can be a fisher, you can be anyway, then we have the followers. You get those as well, retainers and stuff. You got based on your charisma, you get a maximum number of followers that you can have, as per usual. And then we get into equipment. So the equipment lists in most games are my favorite topic, even though I'm not, I'm very critical of most of them usually, especially when it comes to weapons. But this game, in my opinion, at least in terms of which weapons are included, does pretty well, in my opinion. And that's, coming from someone who, I do some fencing. I've done some HEMA. My fencing teacher also teaches Byzantine sword fighting and stuff like that. So I've had some, I've had some knowledge rub off on me about Byzantine medieval weaponry and stuff like that. So this book goes into very, very great detail on the weapons included. So obviously we have useful items, adventuring gear, your usual stuff, sacks and sleeping bags and hats, and oh yeah, here's clothes as well, hats and capes and boots and all that stuff. And then we get vehicles, vessels, ships and stuff, as well as beasts of burden. All the way up to war mammoths, yaks and camels, and hunting hawks. So that's pretty awesome. I would like a hawk. Or guard dogs and everything, or guard dogs and hunting dogs as well. All that stuff. So that's all really cool in my opinion. But then we get to the weapons, and that's where it really, really shines in my opinion. So we have, and what's especially nice is that it uses traditional Byzantine words for these weapons, which you don't see every day either. So for example, the mace is called apellatiki. I wasn't aware of that word, but that's basically an iron club, which could either be like a mace with these folds, let's say, in the top, in the head, or with spikes, or otherwise, or just massive, just one solid piece. Ravdos is the staff, Dori is the spear, and Dori generally in Greek means the one-handed spear. That's what the ancient Greeks used. They had the shield and the spear. The spear is the main weapon. Enchiridio enchiridio means it's in the hand, right? And we use that term also for handbooks, enchiridio. But basically, an enchiridio is a short sword. So that's generally what we called the gladius, the short swords that both hoplites and legionaries had, things like that. That they also paired with their shields, but generally they had the spear as the main weapon and the enchiridio as a secondary weapon, as a fallback, as what's the term? Well, I can I can't think of it right now. Anyway. Next we have the machera. So the machera is basically the falchion, the cutlass, the messer, things like that. So shorter swords or bigger knives, right? So they're bigger than a short sword, but shorter than an actual sword. And generally they're fashioned, usually they're curved, but not necessarily. Then we have the xyphos. And we actually pronounce it xyphos and not xiphos, so or xiphos or whatever. The xyphos is your normal arming sword, right? Oh, sidearm, that's the word, right? So an enchiridio is a sidearm, right? It's a secondary weapon. The xyphos is the arming sword, so that's basically your standard. What in D&D generally is called a longsword, but a longsword is a two-handed sword, so that's incorrect. The xyphos is an arming sword or the backsword. The spathi is the two-handed sword. Oh, not even. No. The spathi is my bad. Sorry. The spathi is the saber. Spathi is the saber, and from spathi comes from Latin spata, and from the same word also comes espada and the English spade, right? So spathi. But we generally use spathi for sabers, and spathi, if we put the accent on the I at the end, we use for swords in general. So we also use that term instead of xyphos. We have the saliva. The saliva is a flail. The sphira is a hammer. Tsakouri is an axe. Doridrepano is a polearm with a hook. I'm not sure if I can find a picture of it, but it's a polearm with a hook basically. Longopelikis is the halberd. The pelikis, on the other hand, is a double axe. Is the axes you had in Minoan Crete, let's say, the double axes. The romphea is the great sword or the two-handed sword. The falx is a two-handed front curved sword. That's generally attributed to Thracia, but that was popular in Wallachia and in and Romania and the like, I think, but was also used in Byzantium. The akondio is a javelin, a throwing spear. Svendoni is a sling. Zagra is a crossbow. We also call it Chirovalistra or Valistrida or just Valistra. So that's because it looks like a ballista, right? It's the same mechanism that fires the bolt. Toxo is a bow. Toxosyntheto is a composite bow. Pharetra is the where you put your arrows. I hate to. Okay, one second. Pharetra. Quiver, the quiver. God damn it. Velos is the arrow. Midros is a bolt for a crossbow, and Spheridio is a bullet for the sling. So very nice selection of weapons, and very cool naming conventions. I really like those. And then we have the armors. Those are equally uniquely named. So we have light armor, leather, and cavadio. Thorax. Yeah, the cavadio is a not a brigandine, but the other thing. It's like a felt. Well, not felt. It's actually, it's a fabric tunic filled with rolled up fabrics and stuff to make it tougher. I don't remember what it's called. It's got a specific name as well. The lorikio is I think that's a skill mill type thing. Yeah. The Zava is a chainmail, And the Clivanio, that's the heavy armor, is basically another type of scale mail, but made of thicker scales, and it's basically a whole tunic that is made that way. So yeah, let me just turn off the notifications on my mobile phone because it's getting annoying. All right, so that's as far as the equipment goes. There's some more detail to go into here, but it's not that important. That's your standard fare. What is important to mention, however, is that basically all weapons do a d6 damage. Some weapons do +1 if they're heavy weapons, and others do -1 or something if they're light weapons. Some stuff like that. But later on in the appendix, there's optional rules to differentiate more between the weapons, so they each have their own bonuses and penalties for the damage types. Okay, anyway, this is going to be a long one, guys. Hope you're in for it. So let's see. We have a bunch of other stuff here. Okay, I mean, you can roll for your equipment as well, apparently, which is cool. Also, the weight is measured in stones, litharia. So that's another interesting thing. I haven't looked at the encumbrance rules yet, but I think it's just, based on your strength. Actually, wait a minute. It should be here somewhere. Επιβάρυνση. Here you go. Ταχύτητα αναγύρω. Ένα λιθάρι. Okay. Ένα λιθάρι. So one lithari, one stone, is a kilo. So we do use based metric system here. Oh yeah, and based on your strength, you can have a limit, a carrying limit, basically. So yeah, you have your lightweight, your medium weight, and your heavyweight, and based on wait, I'm actually doing this wrong. So you have your lightweight, medium weight, heavyweight, and over encumbered, right? And then your movement speed based on that. So that's fairly straightforward. Nothing special here. And yeah, that's as far as equipment goes. And then lastly, in this PDF, we have magic. Magic is your standard fare. There's some interesting things here, but basically it works the same way as in D&D. Only you have just one magic user class that has to do everything. So there's no distinction between cleric spells and magic user spells, let's say. So we have a list of spells up to level 6th. You can roll for them as well, I think, each time you level up. You have things like Exorcism, Magical Opening, Echo, Heroism, Speaking Tongues, Slow, Therima Phyton. Oh, this is interesting. You can turn plants into monsters that fight on your side. Snowstorm, Miasma, Steel Wall. Necranastasi is interesting. That's Resurrection. A Sword Storm. Spell of Death. Earthquake. Things like that. So, pretty interesting. It works the same way as you'd expect, so there's no need to go into that all too much, but just to give you an idea of how they're conceived, let's say. All right, and then lastly, we have a few notes here after this chapter. Let's see, I don't need to go through all this. Oh yeah, this is also interesting. Kretinismos, you turn someone stupid. All right, let's go towards the end. Okay, then we have a list of names. So this is the last part of the player's handbook here. So you can roll for your name if you like. These names are all very flavorful and very Byzantine sounding, right? So if you can think of something in that flavor, let's say, you can always roll here. We've got two columns of male names and one for female, as well as toponyms, which you could also use both for. Yeah, you could actually also use them for characters as well. Some of these. So if you let's roll a name here and see what we get. So I have a 64. A 64 would be either Tervis or Lycaon. Lycaon is pretty nice. Or Flavia if you're female. Or if it's a place, it could be Trilorion or Scythopolis. Things like that. Atalos, Fokas. Fokas is a well-known Byzantine noble family. Kinops, Drusilla, Stirga. There was another one that... Korax. Korax is my current character in another game I play. Agatharchidis. Okay, Agatharchidis is a very funny name. So Archidi means basically the testicle, and Agatho means good. So he he is a good or a blessed testicle. Vodalos, Andronikos, Drakon. Drakon is nice. Elpinor or Ephialtis. Ephialtis you probably know from 300 from Thermopylae. All right. Anyway, so we have a bunch of flavorful names. And I wanted to read this to give you guys an idea about what this game is really about. And it says, I'll read it in Greek first because it's pretty impressive, I think. Επίλογος. Εκδικητική σπάθη θα πέσει στην ανόητη κεφαλή εκείνου που θα προσκυνήσει τους κανόνες και θα τους επικαλεστεί ενάντια στην κρίση του διαιτητή και της γενικής πρόθεσης του παιχνιδιού. Το σημαντικό είναι το πνεύμα του παιχνιδιού και όχι τυφλή τήρηση των κανονών. Ο τελικός απόλυτος κριτής των πάντων στο χρονικό είναι μόνον ο διαιτητής, αυτός που θα λυγίσει τους κανόνες και τους μηχανισμούς κατά τη βούλησή του και θα θέσει τα όρια της λειτουργίας του, διαμορφώνοντας το παιχνίδι. Ο λόγος του είναι υπέρτατος νόμος, δεν οφείλει τίποτα σε κανέναν και δεν έχει δικαίωμα και έχει δικαίωμα να απαντάει σε κάθε διαμαρτυρία με αγενείς φράσεις όπως «Στα αρχίδια μου ας πρόσεχες» ή «Τράβα σάλτσα και καμίσου». Each time I read this I have to laugh. So basically what this means is woe to him who doubts the referee's rule, let's say, the referee's decision, right? So, and it basically admonishes players for being slaves to the rules and not to the referee and things like that. And if the referee the referee always has the right. The referee has the right to bend the rules to his will at any time, and has the retains the right to respond to complaints with rude expletions like I don't give a fuck. You should have paid attention, or pull sauce and go fuck yourself. That's a Greek expression, or actually it's probably a Thessalonikian expression because I wasn't aware of it. Trava salta και καμίσου. Trava salsa sounded funnier, but trava salta it is. So I think that means just pull a salto and go fuck yourself. Okay, so on that happy note, we've gone through the free player PDF, but there's still a couple of things I wanted to show you, and for that I'll have to go back to the webcam because I don't have a top-down camera. Let me just light my cigarette again because I got a hankering for nicotine. Nice. Okay. So what do we have here? After chapter 4, we begin with the chapter about combat. I think these are fairly standard, so I won't go into too much detail. I already explained the combat dice, how those worked. So basically, you add your target number, let's say, to the armor class of the opponent, and you try to roll higher than that with 2d6. Very simple, very interesting, because it's an interesting take on Thaco, actually. Come to think of it, it's very clever. I'm actually very impressed with it. So there's the rules for ranged attacks, for fighting on horseback, for spells, obviously, things like that. Then we have a chapter, the DM chapter, about the setting and the chronicle. So basically the campaign, right? The campaign is called the chronicle here, and the setting is called the skiniko. Skiniko means the scene, basically. It has information about the general fame of the mercenaries, of the adventurers. It has rules for hex crawls, dungeon crawls. It also has, and it has a bunch of tables for anything you can think of. For ruins, for buildings. It's got tables for dungeons. Let me see if I can find those. Meestal plitas lumeri. Tijonsi blokon. It's got rules for, or tables for encounters. Both monsters encounters and human encounters. So if you roll for a human, you can roll for a type of human. It could be barbarians, Amazons, raiders, dervishes, traders, bandits, nomads, soldiers, or mercenaries. Wait, there was one more. Oh, Amazons. Yeah. Encounters at sea, harpies, Telkines. Oh, you've got Telkines in this game. Interesting. Pirates, soldiers, and so on. Then we got a separate chapter for labyrinths and ruins. So basically your dungeons, treasure in the labyrinth, and then we have generators for making your labyrinths on the fly. We've got things like this. You can even determine where the doors are, stairs if they go up or down. No, wait, these are the exits. Doors, stairs. No, yeah, stairs. What type of stair? What type of staircase? Let's say, or it could even be a hatch. If they go up or down, how deep they are, and so on. And then treasure, and a whole list of what you could get. Very cool. Traps as well, I think. Yeah, traps. Here's traps. Types of rooms. Unexplained sounds, smells. Even that. You can roll for smells in this game. What the fuck? It's amazing. I mean, even if you weren't playing this game, you could easily use all these tables in Lamentations or in Old School Essentials. Very, very useful. If you just to build the atmosphere, yeah, you can just roll anything up. You don't even need to, theoretically, if you know these tables well, or if you have you could make a whole GM screen with it, and just have them all in front of you, and just roll anything up at any time. Anyway, monsters. So the monsters are very cool in this game as well. There's a combination of your basic D&D monsters and general folkloric animals and kind of Lovecraftian stuff. So look at this, for example. I don't know if you can see that. Right, this is fairly Lovecraftian. But all of them have kind of been kind of translated into this pseudo Byzantine Central Asian kind of form, right? So, for example, the first one that shows up, and that's more or less the mascot of the game as well, is the Avisale. Wait, wrong page. Here you go. Right? See this picture here? He kind of looks like one of those Indonesian demons, or like a Rakshasa, or a jinn of some kind. But basically, what happens, what it explains, is that they are Stygian ogres, and they can basically cast at will flight and invisibility and darkness, and transform self into humans. So they can turn into humans at will, and they can once per day they can cast charm, hypnosis, and cone of cold. And once per day they can also they can basically take an ethereal shape, basically, so they can walk through walls and stuff. Which means these are basically ogre mages. It's an ogre mage. They're ogres, but they live in the Stygian abyss, and they cast spells. Later on, we also have the ogres themselves. They're called Ogriones in this game, but it's the same root, Ogrionas, ogre. So that's how I came to this conclusion. I'm not sure if you have trolls in this game, but you have your standard fare. You have minotaurs, you have drakes and dragons, you have ichthyones. These are the fish people. You know, the Dagon worshippers or whatever. You know, Lovecraftian kind of thing. You have the Ifrits, so these are the fire jinn. You know, the jinn. Cacodemons, manticores, mammoths, centaurs, all that stuff. Naga, medusas, nymphs, plague bearers. Oh, here's the ogre, Ogrionas. He looks like a big ape, like Bigfoot. Purple worms. So purple worms are basically from D&D, right? Flesh-eating trees, or carnivore trees, and so on and so forth. A lot of monsters. Pretty impressive list, in my opinion. And there's a bunch of stuff that you don't find elsewhere as well. I think those would be easy to translate into other games as well, because they have the usual fare of stat blocks. So they have hit dice, as you'd expect. Armor class, well, you'd have to translate that probably. How many there are in a lair, how many there are in the wild, their movement, their treasure, stuff like that. All very cool. And you have paradoxical monsters, so you can even generate your own monsters. It has a whole list, even to generate their names. Just absolute gold. More treasure, and here's all the treasure in all its detail. Magic items, potions, scrolls, rings and stuff, magic staves and wands, all that stuff, all that jazz. Oh, that's a nice picture. Look at that. I wonder if you can see it. It looks really cool. I think that's a throne, to be honest. There are thrones in this game, and the thrones are like, I mean, they're, you know, like biblically accurate angels, you know, the meme, but they're absolutely terrifying in this game. and they're up to no good. They're basically archons. Anyway, ice swords, stuff like that. I think that here's another throne. Yeah. So yeah, treasure, 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 and then we have the DM's guide, how to referee the game, how to run an adventure, how to keep track of time, torches, darkness, and in labyrinths, all that jazz, all that good stuff. Perceiving sounds, perception, all that stuff, and then you have an example of play, and yeah, and then we have the appendix. So the appendix is very interesting because it has a bunch of, among others, a bunch of optional rules. So you get, for example, instead of rolling for background, you can roll for your social class. So you could be a plebeian, a craftsman, or a noble, or a lord, or whatever. And then based on your class, you could roll your background, which is kind of the reverse of what we saw earlier. And then we have, okay, so here's the table I mentioned, where you basically can differentiate further between weapons, right? So you can have a and this is interesting as well, because depending on what armor you are targeting, you're getting a bonus or a penalty on your damage roll, which is very, very interesting, very accurate in a way, because the armor plays a big role in what kind of damage you can do, and the type of weapon, whether it can go through the armor or not. For example, a hammer, right? A hammer gets a -1, except for heavy armor, which makes sense because it's made to break through heavy armor, right? So stuff like that, very cool, very, very cool. It also has rules, believe it or not, for strongholds and large-scale warfare, as well as just managing your kingdom, diplomacy, stuff like that, unexpected events, absolutely mind-boggling stuff, and that's all in the appendix. It's not even they're like, if you want, you can do that. I mean, what the fuck? Yeah, it's very extensive, right? It's not. I'm not. They're not kidding around, but they put it in the appendix as in, it doesn't really say much about building a stronghold at level 9 or whatever. Then there are optional rules for demi-humans as well. It only offers a couple of examples, and those are the wild men, the dog heads, and that's it actually. But you can also make your own, and there's a bunch of examples in the master section that you could use. But use probably the ones that have only one hit die. And then you also have generators or random tables for NPCs, which the DM can roll, and other stuff. Okay, alternate rules for retainers. Βοηθήματα για το χρονικό, you need to have. Okay, so adventure seeds basically that you can generate at any time. Just absolutely chock full with just generators and stuff. Okay, this is another interesting chapter. So here basically you have random tables to generate deities and religions and cults and stuff like that. Absolutely mind-blowing. Also, even to generate their names, right? Because that's always in there for some reason. Very cool. And you have a little chapter with advice for players, how they should conduct themselves in the game. Not in the game, but in the story, right? What they should look out for. Fame and opportunity. Gathering information list before the adventure. Stocking up. And followers, retainers. Dungeon crawling. What to pay attention to. Scouting ahead. Map, keeping maps of the place. Finding, I think, stealth, using stealth, rhetorics, basically diplomacy with encounters, battle, retreat, maybe, if necessary, teamwork, experimentation, logistics, and so on and so forth. And then we have a couple of proverbs, adventure proverbs. I mean, it's just my favorite is the top one. The first one is Opios nifta per pati, mazes melanes pati. This is a so basically it says whoever walks at night will step on black slimes or black puddings. What this means, I mean, obviously it's a monster, right? But the funny thing is the original, the real Greek proverb is actually worse because it says "Opios nykta per pati, laspes kis kata pati." So whoever walks at night will step in mud and shit, basically. So if you're not looking ahead, or if you're out in the dark, you're bound to get into trouble. All right, so these are humorous. I won't get into those because I think trying to translate those would get awkward, and I'm not really into that. And then we have languages and names. You can generate even more names here, which are always very cool. And there's names based on your language as well. So, for example, if you're a nomad, right, you have a separate list of names you could roll. Or if you were, you have archaic names like Marduk and Lilith, but also things like Sarkalisari or Lugal Banda or Malem Kis or Meskalamdor or Balgarda, stuff like so. Basically, like old Persian names and stuff like that. And even other languages, Chthonian, for example, Vavek, Hasatha, stuff like that. Just ridiculous. What's the last one? Demonic names, even. Just crazy, dude. Just crazy. Okay, and then you have titles that you can get, right? You have your normal fare of Byzantine titles, though, not European ones. So no kings, barons, or kings, dukes, counts, barons, and so forth. But here you have kings, despots. Oh, you do have dukes. And eparchos, anaktas, kleftodespotis. Kleftodespotis is basically robber baron. You can have that too. You can have titles. You can have academic titles as well. But you also or military titles. What else? And you have titles within other tribes, like nomad titles, wildman titles, doghead titles, ogre titles, and Telonia, I think, are goblins, so goblin titles probably. Things like that. And then we have the appendix come on, what was it? Appendix J, Appendix I, you know, the recommended reading. So this is very interesting as well, because obviously it states the usual fare of Fritz Leiber's Varford and the Grey Mouser, Howard Philip Lovecraft, whatever you can find, Jack Vance's Dying Earth trilogy, Robert E. Howard, Conan the Barbarian, and other stories. But then we have Epos to Vasiliou the Yeni Akrita, which is about the Yenis Akritas, who was one of the border guards in Byzantine Empire, who got songs written about him, epics, fighting like giant Saracens and stuff like that. Very cool. As well as more books about the Yenis Akritas, or about Alexander the Great, and about the books of Fotis Iliopoulos, as I mentioned before, ο Θεός Κόνανος, τα δαιμόνια της Φρίγιας, εξ Ανατολών πνεύματα οργισμένα, ο Αστρολάβος. Those are fairly esoteric literature, and fairly bizarre, to be honest, but very cool. Also books like historical works like Andrea Babouin, the offensive weapons of the Byzantines in the latter period, things like that. Also Herodotus histories. Magic as a social phenomenon in early Byzantium. Synopsis Historion, Leandro Sofou Tactica, military books from Byzantium. Michai Psellos, Peridaimonikon Energion. So Michai Psellos was the Byzantine philosopher and alchemist, and he wrote a book about demonic energies. Very interesting. I haven't looked into that. I might, now that I know it exists. More books about Akritas. There's also one by Sia Kalam. Sia Kalam, the Black Pen, is a collection of pictures of people and demons of Central Asia of the 14th century. Sorry. Stuff like that. So it's a very interesting collection. Oh yeah, and it also states about games that inspired it. So obviously you have Gary Gygax and Dave Arneson, Dungeons and Dragons, the original edition from 1974. Gary Gygax and Jeff Perrin, Chainmail. Gary Gygax, AD&D Dungeon Master's Guide, and M.A.R. Barker, Empire of the Petal Throne. Interesting, very cool. Obviously, also a footnote about illustrations in this book. Obviously, a lot of it is public domain, mostly stuff by Theodor Kittelsen, Olaus Magnus, Hieronymus Bos, Peter Breugel, Nikolai Kalmykov, and Nicholas Roerich. Very, very interesting stuff. Roerich I don't really like as a person, but his paintings are very interesting. Also Byzantine frescoes and miniatures from old codices, stuff like that. Anyway, oh yeah, and the Sia Kalam. All right, and we have the epilogue again that I already read halfway the video. So, and even more. Oh, and we got a synopsis of all the tables in one place. That's just amazing. So you can, well, not all of them, but a lot. And we have the character sheet, and I hope you can see it. It's kind of vague, but I think it's a very elegant character sheet, to be honest. And as I said, I particularly like the naming conventions of the abilities and the weapons and everything. I'm honestly not 100% sold on the D6 system, to be honest. But other than that, this is a very solid game, very very solid. And especially like the wealth of tools that are in this book, which you could use for anything you can imagine. It's just absolutely mind-boggling. So yeah, that was Kryptes Katharmata, Crypts and Creeps. That's what I'm sticking with. Crypts and Creeps. I think that sounds pretty catchy. Amazing book. If you have the chance to get it, if you're Greek, I can certainly recommend it. It's a very unique item, very unique product, and it definitely looks like a lot of fun. I'm definitely going to play it someday. I just need to get me a group that speaks Greek. I mean, that's not so hard. I live in Greece, obviously, but the funny thing is, I actually work in telecommunications, so I actually have mostly strangers around me. So yeah, most of my groups are either Dutch speaking or English. But it's not a problem. I'll find someone. I have a Greek group. It's just that I have a different game I play with them. So anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed. I had a lot of fun walking you through this. And as I said, I can wholeheartedly recommend it. See this kind of product every day. I don't think I've thought about pitching a translation to them, but I don't think that makes a lot of sense. Because the part of the uniqueness of this game is in its use of language, unfortunately. So translating it would kind of defeat the purpose. And then what you could do, though, I mean, it's not that you couldn't translate it, but what you could definitely translate to get that flavor across would be all these tables. So that could definitely be useful. So I might look into that someday. But I think personally, this game, in my opinion, comes very close to in terms of flavor and atmosphere, comes very close to Lamentations of the Flame Princess, which I really enjoy. And I'm still on the fence on which of the two I'd rather play. Currently, I'm playing Basic Fantasy, and I'm actually having a lot of fun with that as well. I just ran Black Apple Bro, Black Apple Bro, Black Apple Brew, Black Apple Burrow, which, funnily enough, actually made me want to play Lamentations even more. But at the same time, it doesn't really matter, because the rules are basically the same. It's basic fantasy, basic D&D. So I'm getting there slowly but surely. I'm building up my repertoire and building up my skills as a dungeon master. And at the same time, I'm still exploring different games that I might want to play. This one's definitely on my list. So yeah, guys. Once again, hope you enjoyed. I'm gonna call it a night, and I'll see you next time.